Hey everyone, I'm Sue Hilliard. Robin Grabfelder and I would like to welcome you to the EA Zoom Meetings 2022 Year Ahead panel. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that it's been a rough year for EA Zoom meetings, having lost our fearless leader, Linda Johnson, a little more than 6 months ago, right after the lunar eclipse. We all still miss her immensely and are doing our best to carry on the work that was so dear to her. One of her favorite events was the Year Ahead panel. We're doing it a little differently this year and hope that you will enjoy what we have planned. After conducting a poll of members in the EA Zoom Facebook group, we determined the planetary configurations and issues you all considered to be the most pertinent ones of the coming year, and have put together 3 all-star panels of your favorite astrologers to talk about them. Each day, we have a different moderator and set of panelists to investigate these topics. Today, we'll have Patricia Walsh, an evolutionary astrologer, astrology teacher, deep memory process chief trainer, and author of the book, Understanding Karmic Complexes. Patricia will introduce the rest of the panel and tell you about their topics for today. Go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, here we are. So, Merry Yule and Solstice, everyone. This is the first day of 2 or 3 days. I forgot.
3.
3 days. This is the first panel for 3 days of taking a peek into the new year. All of the planetary configurations, as Sue mentioned, that everybody was interested in hearing about. We are, this first hour and a half, we're here for 3 hours. This first hour and a half, we're going to be focusing on with the panel that I have here, which is Nura Rachelle, Jason Holley, and Ari Moshe Wolfe. And we're supposed to have another, we don't know where he is, but if he shows up, Eric Pride will be joining us also. We're going to be focusing on Venus retrograde, which we're in right now, and then the nodal shift, as the nodes will be shifting from, excuse me, Sag Gemini to Scorpio Taurus. So to kick us off, I'm just going to put up some charts, but I just kind of want to talk about this period of time. So, well, let me see, I'll put up that chart first. I'm going to put up the Venus retrograde chart because that's the first thing we're going to discuss. I'd like to take them in order of the way that they're happening. So the Venus retrograde chart here, I just wanted to say on a personal level that as Venus was coming into orb of conjuncting Pluto, and I wasn't even really thinking of it. I mean, I am an astrologer, but I don't live by the chart. I don't obsessively look at it, you know, although, you know, when I get strong feelings, I then go, oh, that makes sense. So what was coming back to me during Venus coming into conjunction with Pluto was something that would be typical around this time, and some of you may be feeling it, but the word that I gave it was collective grief. Because what was coming back to me were very stark memories of few tragedies that happened around Christmas time. And the first one of those was the tsunami in 2004, where over 250,000 people were killed. And that was December 26th of 2004. And that one hit me psychically, because I kind of felt it coming. It had that feeling of like, although who knows what it was, it had the feeling of collective grief, like something was going to happen. And then the other incident that keeps coming back to my memory, which is personal to me, was the Sandy Hook shooting that happened on December 14th in 2012. And that was personal to me because I lived in Newtown and I was in Newtown at the time. And I can't even talk about it without still getting tears in my eyes. And that was 2012. What struck me, so I went and looked at the charts And of course, what we had during that time were, so let me back up. The Banda Aceh tsunami had the transiting nodes at 0 degrees Scorpio Taurus. In fact, it was when the tsunami hit, they were exactly finishing the transit of that time. And later that day shifted to Libra Aries. So we know the nodes move from 29 degrees to 0 degrees. So that earlier when they had shifted was 2003. The nodal, the time that the nodes are in that period of time are about 18, 19 months. And so in 2023 is when it had shifted to Scorpio Taurus. Now that was exact to what we have now, meaning that the nodal shift that's coming up is a Scorpio South node moving to a Taurus North node. And then the other one, the Sandy Hook one, we had the nodes, let me see, they were, hold on, I have notes on this. The last nodal shift, yeah, that was 2024. We had the nodes, they were Scorpio Taurus then, but I believe that they were reverse. Yes, they were Taurus South node, Scorpio North node. What also was resonant of that time that we have here with Pluto and Venus going retrograde archetypally. At that time, we also had a mutual reception, I'm talking about Sandy Hook, between Pluto and Saturn, right? Which brings in very strongly the Scorpio Capricorn archetypes. And so just back to that Sandy Hook time, I do have the charts, but I don't need to put them up because I'm not focusing on them. Or, you know, I don't want to focus on them because the feelings of those times were so heavy and so dense. But at this time, we still have collective grief in the air. I mean, let's face it, since Pluto's going into Capricorn and the world financial crisis hit almost exactly to the second that Pluto went into Capricorn, then we've kind of had one punch after another. You know, we've had the Pluto and Capricorn financial crisis. Then we, of course, have had COVID, and we've had the US and all of the world kind of in upheaval. We had Saturn, Pluto Uranus squares. We've had a lot of unrest, right? We've had a lot of you know, things being kind of turned upside down, which we would expect with Pluto and Capricorn. We are going to be concluding this period eventually. You know, Pluto will ingress into Aquarius, but we still have a few things coming up this year that are really important to this. And we are kicking off this period of time with this Venus retrograde here. I put the charts for Washington, DC, sorry for being so US centric, but just to give it a place and time. So we have Venus going retrograde here. Now, what does that mean? So, you know, digging up shadow is digging up shadow. And it's usually not a pretty process. And this is what I was saying about the Sandy Hook time. We had Saturn and Pluto in mutual reception, which I had, and that was in 2012. And in 2011, I'd given a lecture in Serbia when I saw that coming and said, collective shadow. We're about to get hit with collective shadow. That Sandy Hook event, to me, was the epitome of the juxtaposition of evil and innocence, right? Of darkness and light, which to me is the heart of the Scorpio archetype. So the Scorpio archetype to me is about the highest of the high and the lowest of the low. And the juxtaposition of the innocence of those babies slaughtered by, unfortunately, what I could tune into a possessed other adolescent child, is really that, and weirdly enough, the shooter lived on Yogananda Lane. Okay, so you can't get more kind of surreal than the symbolism of what happened there outside of the real tragedy of what happened there. Like I said, I can't even go near that. So the point of collective shadow and collective grief is that we don't do enough of it. And so we do get these times, these periods of times when things come into a pressure cooker and they come to the surface. We are also heading into, we've been in it, but we're heading into the US's exact Pluto return. And we can talk about that later when we put up some charts, which is we've been feeling it ever since Pluto went into Capricorn, but most effectively since 2017, when Pluto became in orb of its, in opposition of its discovery point, but in orb of the US's Pluto. So we've all been feeling it, the rise of totalitarianism, the plutocracy, the tightening. I called it, I gave a lecture at Norwalk, and I called this time that we're coming into the US Pluto return in this Capricorn time, I called it the winter of our discontent. And winter is, of course, a time when we tighten belts. Winter is a time where we have to look at reality. Winter is a time where we have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. And some of that is what's here now, right? What I also mention about this collective grieving, and when I say we don't do enough of it, again, in the category of you can't make this stuff up, when Venus came into conjunction of Pluto, which is just, a week or so ago, Malidoma Some passed. I just saw it come up on my news feed. And he was somebody that I knew, but he's an African Dagara shaman, well known. If you've never read his book, it's called Of Water in the Spirit. And he traveled the world doing collective grief rituals. And his teaching was exactly what I'm saying. We don't grieve enough. So part of clearing out the closet here as we then come into this year is to do these kind of retrospective things, right? Is to kind of clear out the cobwebs. And like I said, there is a lot of collective grief in the air. I hope we're not coming to something as horrible as the other two events that I mentioned. And it may not be so. And I'm a little hopeful about that, because when I put up the Nodal Shift chart, you can see that. But let me just pause here, since I've laid some heavy stuff on you, and see if anybody else wants to have some perspective or share further on this Venus retrograde period that we're closing out and beginning the year with.
I think, Patricia, what was really coming up for me in all that you were sharing was, especially around the nature of Capricorn, is how important it is to take these things seriously. I find it really interesting. Well, of course, whenever we're going through the Venus retrograde portal, there's always a Venus star point. There's always a shift in an initiation gate. So we've been working with this North Node, Gemini, Venus star point, Gemini. There's been a lot of back and forth information. We've been very in our heads, very much in our thoughts. And I feel like this shift into the Venus stargate, Venus star point Capricorn, along with the Pluto return for the United States, Capricorn, as well as the nodal shift with the Taurus Scorpio, there's a lot of this feminine energy that's asking us to get into our bodies and really feel things. And I think the Capricorn energy is asking us to take it seriously. Like it really isn't a game. It's the quality of our lives. It's the quality of our future and the foundations that we're creating. So to really look at these things and to be able to feel into, oh, there's a lot here. Oh, this maybe makes my heart feel a little heavy. Okay, so now what are we going to do with this? How are we going to come together as the community, and how are we going to make it okay to feel as a collective?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Reality. I mean, this is Capricorn, right? It's the nature of Capricorn. It's looking at reality.
Something I've been meditating on with this Venus retrograde. Being in Capricorn, how much construct we've built around protecting ourselves from feeling the things that we don't want to feel. And this is not just it is the nature of the society and the world that we're living in right now, and the extent to which it is conditioned within us to normalize not feeling, to normalize not allowing ourselves to become more intimate and connected to ourselves through all kinds of experiences. One of the issues with Capricorn is, well, this is how it's supposed to be. And when we apply that idea of this is how it's supposed to be, we say, well, this is how I'm supposed to feel. This is how I'm supposed to feel about my life, my work, my relationship. This is how I'm supposed to feel about things happening in the world. This is how we're supposed to be relating about it. All these ways in which we've built these crystallized constructs that don't really allow us to, here's what comes to me, let go. I mean, like there's a space for it, and I think this is so alive right now. Venus is, the brightness is diminishing, moving into that conjunction where there's, she's in that underworld, moving into that underworld phase with Pluto. I mean, the symbology couldn't be more clear. And how uncomfortable it often is for us just to accept, oh, mercy, I'm here now. No answer, no solution. My past learning, the conditioning, all of my ideas of what I want it to be and how I want it to be, how I want to feel. I think that's one of the issues with Venus in general. It's that movement away from discomfort and the more, gross level identification with whatever makes me feel good. I don't want to feel not good, and I want to feel good. Yes, chocolate, no grieving. Yes, everything's good, and I'm ordering my reality in the way that makes me feel how I want to feel. No, two things aren't the way I want it to be. There's the dissonance of Capricorn also is, well, this doesn't fit into the box that I've created. This doesn't equate to the world that I've decided. And so I think there's just a strong invitation right now, personally, collectively. It's just so awake to be where we are. I've never really seen a conglomeration of transits that are just so clear in that invitation. You can't force things right now. And we can also just drop into the fact that the ruler of all that is Saturn, which in the square to Uranus is saying there's so much we don't know. There's so much releasing itself from the subconscious, from that realm that we're just suppressing constantly. So this is a very powerful time in that way.
And what you bring up to mind for me too is just the nature of the retrograde function as we understand it in evolutionary astrology is a liberating function. And when you look at the dual rulership of Saturn, Uranus here, as would be traditional and modern rulers of Saturn sitting in Aquarius, and then Venus retrograde is liberation, right? So Saturn, Capricorn alone being an archetype of deconditioning. So what does deconditioning mean? It means becoming subconscious, becoming aware of what's in the basement first, right? That's the shadow work. So when I talk about shadow, it's not, yes, some of the things that I was talking about, especially with the Sandy Hook thing, is stark shadow. But shadow is anything that's in your subconscious and out of the range of your conscious mind. So that can be, old, it's just like cleaning out your basement, picking up the old mementos, holding them, feeling them. What do they mean, right? Venus with it retrograde is also that perhaps ability to throw off some of what you were talking about, Ari, those shoulds, which is a very Capricorn statement, right? You should, I must. You were saying, I should feel this, I shouldn't feel that. So when we go through and pick up these mementos and look at those old photos and clean out those old files and bring up those old memories, The potentiality is to not just reframe them, but really liberate something from the whole, your whole psyche, right? And so this is what I mean also about this, because even the things that don't serve us that we're letting go of, right? When we let go of them, if we don't allow the grieving process, we have not honored the process at all. And even when it's something that doesn't serve you well, and I know this so much from working myself and clients, we let go of something that's horrible, yet we still need sometimes we still feel that sense of grief. And it's good to give into that, right? Or when I say give into it, it's good to honor that, right? By expressing it. So this Venus retrograde time, it's also interesting. Adam Gain, I was on a CIA panel talking, we did a whole Venus masterclass, and Adam Gainsbourg had pointed out that when Venus came into conjunction with Pluto, it was an actual occultation. It wasn't just a Venus-Pluto conjunction. What that means is that by latitude and longitude, Venus and Pluto were aligned for quite some time, which gives extra punch to that Venus-Pluto energy, right? Because it is an actual occultation. And so I think that's part of what gives it that, I know I was saying before, all of these old lovers have shown up and old acquaintances and all that, which is typical. And people are going to feel that during this time, not just Venus retrograde, but the Venus conjunct Pluto time and Venus in Capricorn. I mean, this is really a triple signature of, going one step forward, two steps back, right? To really go forward, we need to reach into the past. We need to pull, we need to go back there, to regress back to something, to progress, to fully resurrect. As Venus is going into that underworld, she will resurrect, right? The 40 days in the underworld, she will resurrect as the morning star. And interestingly enough, that time for the Aboriginal people, when Venus shows up at this time, after she's done with this underworld journey, at this star point, is a time they call Venus Barumbur, and it's the Barumbur festival where they celebrate Venus is the one who gives them the ability to communicate with the dead. And they imagine a string that comes from Venus when in her first appearance as morning star. And it's like a line, like a cord that goes to the underworld and the ancestors, and they can talk to them. And so again, this is this honoring, burying, communicating with, liberating from all of those things from the past that have not served us, but honoring them and giving them the proper burial.
I wanted to pick up on what you shared, had about the occultation, because that felt very important to me too, which really, for people, in case people don't track that, I mean, essentially what has happened is Venus has eclipsed Pluto, right? It has moved, it's gone right over because of the alignment of zodiacal longitude and declination. So they're right over. So it's a very interesting moment if you're thinking about planetary rays and Pluto's ray being occulted by Venus, and this kind of moment where and these, of course, from modern rulership, are the rulers of the nodes that we'll be under over the next couple year and a half, beginning in January. So there is such a punch to it. And the thing that really I feel about the Venus Pluto and the retrograde is the way that it is like it's a little bit like if you thought you'd hit the bottom and then the bottom opens up and you realize, there's further to fall. I was appreciating what both of you were saying, all three of you were saying. It's like there's further to fall, and the question is, how vulnerably will you fall, right? Like this chart has a Cancer moon, more or less a full Cancer moon. this Venus retrograde chart. It's vulnerable, right? It's vulnerable, and it's feeling into and being out of control. And to me, Venus retrograde in Capricorn is really an undoing, right? Because in Capricorn, as the tendency to kind of like hold it together, figure out how to manage the unmanageable is a Capricorn specialty. And when the retrograde activates, it really is an invitation. It throws our attention even more so to the polarity, right? And so what do we do over there? We care for each other. We express how out of control we feel. We express how sad we feel. Venus does, I always think of Venus as uncomfortable in Capricorn, but from a traditional perspective, Venus does have triplicity rulership in Capricorn during the day. And that's an interesting one, because triplicity rulership is about being able to call on other people, right? I'm a person who has everything bad in my chart by the traditional way. It's all detriment and fall. It's a fucking disaster. And it actually has been more or less one disaster after another, self-imposed. However, I do have one little saving grace, which is I have a triplicity planet, and I've always felt that although everything is overwhelming, I can call on people. I'm really good at that. And I do that naturally as a Cancer South node conjunctus in there. My first instinct is to, grab something and not let go, usually another person. And so I think that instinct is not so bad right now. I think it's a really nice instinct, meaning to feel how hard this is, to feel. I do appreciate, although my body was like, as you opened us and you began to speak of the tsunami on Sandy Hook, and I sort of felt the flood in my body, right? I just felt like, I didn't even mean to say the word flood just now, but interesting that I did. But it's like, I felt that activation all through me. I still do, right? And I notice I need to be moving. I feel this need to like move. And I always feel with Capricorn, right, you've got that goat, but you also have that sea tail that is in the water and needs to be moving, because there's a lot of stuff to move. And being in our animal bodies, Nura was talking about remembering the body and being back in the body after all this head stuff. And it's like, there is some kind of, when I see the Venus there, I feel like there's some sort of, getting in that deconditioning you're talking about, right? It's like just moving it and moving with it and being kind of out of control. I don't mean that in a big way. Like, it's interesting. I think of the word wild too, because I do think this is an animal moment, but it's like, wild doesn't mean wild and crazy and all. It doesn't, wild doesn't have to be Sagittarius wild, right? Wild is really just instinctual. It's following where the body goes naturally and what it feels and moving with it. And so when I see this, I feel that need. And I am intrigued by the chart that you put up in Washington, because it's very close to the Sibley ascendant chart, right? Where, like, it's just a degree and a half or so off of there, I think. I think it's 12 or 13 Sag. So that's really powerful, right? And this Venus station's essentially on the USA Pluto.
27 degrees, yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable. And I hadn't even really, that hadn't hit my head until I saw this chart you put up. But for me, there's just a need to be really not in control, because as Ari said, so much is unknown, and surely the last couple of years have really reinforced that more than ever. And that's the help to me of a Sag Gemini nodal axis, is that by the end of that transit, you really do know that you don't know anything. You go in thinking you know everything with South Node and Sagittarius. hopefully by the end of the thing, you realize you don't know anything.
Well,
right?
and the thing about that Sag Gemini, which we'll get to in a minute, because we are going to talk about the transiting node shift too. But I remember I did a lecture, and I think it was for EA before we went into Gemini Sag, and I had noticed that Neptune was square that at the ingress, but for a lot, like almost 6 months of that transit, right? Which is exact. And I said then, get comfortable with not knowing, right? question everything and then question it again and and get comfortable with that. Now, I also talked about the rise of QAnon and all of that, which we saw, right? The kind of insanity of that Neptune in Pisces square the, Sag Gemini thing, which is now people are like, what's truth? Is there one? I don't know. What is our source of truth? What is our, and so all of that's kind of really been brought up and spun out. And I think, we're in it, we're concluding it. And then I believe if you've looked at the chart, there's a little bit of a continuation of it in the next nodal shift, but certainly something that's happened with the coronavirus is, and this is what Venus may be bringing to a head also on a personal level for many people, is the reassessment of values. Right. So many people during the lockdown, and this is why we have this huge boom in housing and people moving and shifting, right? Gemini, Sag, everybody's trying to find where do I belong? Because, there was this working remotely. And then all of a sudden people realized my apartment's too small. I don't like this town. I can't stay in this with my family. So much mutable energy has happened because of the lockdown, paradoxically, right? You would think with the lockdown, you'd have people locked down, and they were, but a lot of them moved, a lot of them changed jobs. And with that came the reassessment of values, which is also very key. And I think that this Venus retrograde in Capricorn is kind of putting a cap on that last 2-year period, right? Of since the lockdown, what do we really value? How do we what is our place in relationship? What is our place in, what is our own self-worth? So many people, they're talking about the employment crisis. Well, people aren't going back to work for $3.50 or whatever stupid amount they've been paying. That's a self-worth, right? That's a reassessment of one's worth. That's a reassessment of what one really values.
I feel like all of this is so rich and hits on so many important themes. Like if we think about Capricorn and the affinity with leadership, and we know that there's a collective story around collective leadership. I'm not going to touch that one for now. But if we look at it in ourselves, I think there's a really beautiful opportunity for people to really almost self-initiate into their own form of leadership. I always see the Capricorn as being able to go up the mountain, gather the wisdom, and bring it back down for the people. Or, now you know how to get up to the mountain, so now you're going to help other people get there. So there's this wisdom journey inherent in that. And I feel like when we're talking about the difficulty of confronting the grieving process, shame, I think a lot of people feel an immense amount of shame around vulnerability, like to feel is to be weak. But I feel like if we are wanting to come to a more healed, healthy expression of the fullness of our emotional spectrum, it requires brave leaders. It requires people to say, okay, I'm here, I'm going to be vulnerable in front of you. And that is leadership, to be able to do it gracefully, to say, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I'm experiencing pain right now. And this is important to share. And I feel like that is inspiring for other people. I just know up, it was, you never wanted to be like the only one crying, the only one having a hard time, because it brought negative attention, or it made you seem weak or something like that. And I feel like those are a lot of the distortions that we are moving through. And then there's something with that Capricorn saying, there's an immense strength in vulnerability also with the not knowing, like the being able to be comfortable and authentic in the face of the unknown. I actually tend to trust people more when they admit if they don't know something, rather than pretending that they know everything. And I'm like, I don't know now. I'm more unsure because you're very absolute about everything. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for us to just be more real, almost in a sense, like take off this burden, this very weird, distorted burden of what it is supposed to look like to be a leader, and then reinsert with the authentic way. And something else that I was noticing as well when Venus makes her star point, it's at, and I don't know if we were going to talk about this later. Sorry if I'm speaking it out of time, but she's going to form her star point at 18 degrees 43 minutes Capricorn, January 8th. And that is within a 2-degree orb of Pluto's south node in Capricorn at almost 1959 Capricorn. So they're close too. So there's
Give
just
me that, give
much.
me that date and I'll animate it there. Where is that? I'm sorry, you said when? January?
January 8th
Hold on
is
one
when
second.
Venus makes her star point.
There
And
she is, right?
yeah, yes. And so that conjunction with Pluto's south node, I just think that this is a multi-generational, perhaps multi-timeline, Capricorn and Saturn, the affinity with time. I think we're working through things that are so deeply buried, not just in this personal history, but maybe we're talking like Atlantis, maybe we're talking about the whole history of all of what's going on in the collective shadow. I think we get this opportunity to just look at it a little differently, use that retrograde, redefine what it means to be leaders of our own lives in this earth that we're creating together.
Yeah, and I know a lot of astrologers, myself included, when Pluto went into Capricorn, have been saying this is a time we're going to rewrite our history. And the massive amount of archaeological finds during this time, and really in the last even 10, 15 years, have pushed back the Mesolithic era. They've just predated things, and all of a sudden Neanderthals weren't apes anymore. And I mean, right, just the rewriting of the accepted collective history has also been going on in that way. So there is also, we can extrapolate that to rewriting your own personal history, which is what we talk about when we're saying, going into the basement, looking at the shadow, letting those things that have been gathering cobwebs come to the light of day. But that process is about rewriting your history, your personal history.
Also want to share that one of the biggest challenges with all the strong transformative energy in Capricorn is just getting over that hump of I'm wrong, I did it wrong, I made a mistake, you're wrong, you did it wrong. Like there can be this deeply ingrained self-punishment because things aren't looking good, things are difficult, or like the direct that it's wrong, it's bad, it shouldn't be this way, it made a mistake, like all these ways of thinking that just keep us from the tenderness of the moment, that's asking us to just be here. And I love what was shared around just being able to access more vulnerability and how it's actually a time to hold on to each other and to really just allow ourselves to be where we are. It's such a rich invitation right now.
Yeah, it speaks a lot to the polarity of Cancer Capricorn, how we're learning how to have, the healthy boundaries, of course, but without putting up walls, and knowing that it's a constant renegotiation as well, which requires presence.
The other thing that really comes to me on that Venus retrograde too is about, because you really could see the retrograde on Pluto as the opening to the Pluto return, right? I mean, it's sort of like, that's why I think that eclipsing moment with Pluto by Venus is very interesting, because it would seem to say also that there's some way through with the heart, through what we're about to enter, right? And we've already been in the Pluto return. I mean, really, I would say since the entered by sign, but we will hit the most intense tunnel, right? The endmost cave of the transit will come over the next couple of years, and which I think is impactful to everyone. It's not just an American transit by any means, because what Pluto in Capricorn always does is take down whoever's in charge and put something else in charge, whether it's the Catholic Church and the Reformation or the founding of the United States, whatever it is. It really shifts the way the whole administrative thing is created. So when I see the Venus involved, though, it really puts me also in mind of the bankruptcy of transactional culture, of transactions, that everybody's an object to each other. We're all users. We're employed or we're not employed. We're consumers and users. That's kind of like the way that we are encouraged to understand ourselves in this reality right now. It's a very, to my mind, regressive or uncreative expression of the Capricorn archetype, and it's really like, what does it mean to relate and to not just to transact, right, with people? How do we do that? How do we do that each day and each moment? How do you do that with your partner or your family or your child or your parent? Like in every moment, how often do we reduce the experience to transaction? Even in our experience right here, right now, right? This is becoming more of a conversation, right? And I actually like that they decided to do a panel this time instead of everybody gives their little monologue, one after the next, which is a fine way to do things too. I mean, I don't mean anything negative. I just mean it's like this, conversations are probably more what we need, and that kind of thing versus, I will produce this thing and you will consume this thing. What is it to be in relation, and of course Venus is at a concrete level talks about money, but money of course is just about values and an articulation of what is valued. And so when we also think about forthcoming realities with money and the transformation of monetary and economic systems that Uranus and Taurus and other things also speak to, it's hard not to see that Venus thing though. It's like, how do we embody, not so much create, that's too big. Who knows how it will be created at the large level, but how do we each embody moving out of transactional ways of being and moving into relational ways of being? How do we each embody moving into communities of sharing versus communities of get what I can and be, make myself safe on my own? And every day I face those decisions, right? We all do. I mean, every moment, there's a moment where you can move into transactional exploitation, or you can move into relationship and sharing and trusting. And that's the only way that will happen, right? Is that these micro interactions. So for inner planet Venus to come in there with Pluto's big thing, that's part of what it also speaks to me about. I find this very challenging. It's hard. It's hard to trust sometimes. It's hard to move into sharing when you feel so scared of what's happening in the world, right? If our focus is on fear and on knowing everything, as people were saying earlier, then it activates almost all the regressive defensive psychic structures that are there to protect me, because it's a system of one. It's one person with consciousness and everybody else is an object, whether because they're a different species or because they're a different gender identity or whatever they are. It's like it all gets objectified. But part of the challenge of this Venus retrograde is like, how do you embody the values that I believe are very much our animating values as an EA community? I feel that is one of the most meaningful things that makes me feel bonded to all of you, even though I don't actually even hang out in this sphere as much. The thing that I love is a certain set of shared values about what can be. And this is reevaluation of patriarchy. That's what this whole thing is. And Nura, I'm glad you brought up the nodes of the Pluto and Saturn nodes involved here, because that's exactly, to me, what we're doing. So pretty exciting to embody that on a daily basis. And I think that the Venus makes it personal, is I guess what I'm saying. Besides whatever we want to do about thinking about how to change everything at a big level, there's an embodiment of these values that is possible.
Yeah, and perhaps during this Pluto retrograde time is a time for us to each notice exactly what Jason's talking about. How, while that process of it's a long process of deconditioning, right? I mean, Jason, the Pluto and Capricorn time brings to mind, of course, the changing of the structures, right? And the whole collapse of the military industrial complex, which is
Yes.
the basis of this transactional, well, we can hope so, right? We don't know. But during this time with this Venus retrograde, and like you said, we're talking about liberating ourselves from those structures, right? And you're pointing out about relational and not, I thou, not I it relationships, right? So maybe that's a thing for us to each take away for this next 40 days of this Venus retrograde time, and notice where we are I, it, and where we can be more I, thou. Yeah.
Yeah, that feels really beautiful and kind of like a continuous thing, doesn't it? So,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Want to look at the nodal shift? Okay. I think things lighten up a little bit more eventually.
promises.
Yeah, I know. I can't
I
promise.
think
I'm sorry.
we just get better at handling it. I think that's what's really
That's
happening.
true.
We're more resilient.
That's true.
Nice background.
Oh, thanks. One of my photos, is it? I don't know. Yes, it is one of my photos. All right. So here we are, the nodal shift. So, for me, just quickly, because I really love all of you to weigh in on this with your thoughts. So of course, the nodal shift is happening January 18th. And so we're still in the Venus retrograde. We have a Sun Pluto here. And again, I cast it for Washington. As I mentioned before, the Gemini Sag shift had Neptune in Pisces retrograde. This one has Jupiter in Pisces retrograde. So here's what happened this morning while I was contemplating this and kind of feeling into the coming energy in the way that I do, right? My body and I just want to feel into it and see what does it feel like. I was walking and I was, the words were coming to me, digging for gold, right? That anytime we're underworlds, Venus is digging for gold there. And what are we mining? And I'm thinking of all of this in juxtaposition to the energies of Scorpio, Taurus, and what they have brought up collectively in the past. And I thought, I thought to myself, Jupiter in Pisces is square the nodes. And I looked down and I saw this on the ground. I hope you guys can see this. It's a little purple, it's plastic, but it's a little purple jewel, right? Which is so perfect. This is so Jupiter in Pisces, right? And I have to say, this is my Jupiter return. So I'm a Jupiter in Pisces in the 5th. I'm sorry, in the 12th. And so I know that Jupiter in Pisces has been the angel on my shoulder that has allowed me to go where angels fear to tread and has always pulled me out in the last second, right? So as I bent down and picked up this beautiful, which it doesn't really show the color, but it's really quite purple. It's like if it was an amethyst, it would be an amethyst. When I picked this up, I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe collectively, or even individually, we may go to the edge, right? There may be some impending doom, but let's face it, Capricorn and Scorpio always feel like that. It's like Armageddon, right? All you Pluto and Scorpios are going to feel this time heightened, right? With your Armageddon consciousness, bringing in all of your karmic memories of wipeouts. But this is also this time of, or this is also this possibility of something just pulls us back from the edge, something so graceful, right? Something so unexpected in a beautiful, graceful way. So this Jupiter in Pisces, to me, may continue the conversation that we've been having with our relationship with truth, what is truth and what is not truth, since it's the ruler of the past. So the transiting nodes in Gemini Sag or Sag Gemini, Jupiter would be that, would be the ruler of that past south node that we've been, that we just will be transiting out of, and carrying a bit of that energy that we had of this planet squaring those nodes. So it is it is carrying forward that energy somewhat, But I think now, and I don't know, do we find truth with Jupiter in Pisces? I guess we find, not, maybe there's a truth, but it's a kind of, it's a kind of misty truth. It's a truth that hopefully is transcendent of what we have thought was truth, right? Hopefully is something that's even greater than we could have imagined. But one thing I can definitely say is that this Jupiter in Pisces time, and as it squares the nodes as we come in, so it will flavor, this next 18, 19 months. That I would say that we put on your imagination caps, right? Like this is really a time for visioning. And especially with the Venus retrograde too, I think it's a time for visioning, for opening up to the imaginal.
First, thanks for sharing your superpower ring there.
I love it.
Wow.
Wow.
It really is a very sweet story, and it does have that feeling in that moment when you're sharing it, of Jupiter to the rescue kind of thing. And I think the rescue, I feel, as we're looking at this together, I when I think about Jupiter in Pisces, and it's so fast, speed.
I know
right
it gallops through Pisces.
And
I feel ripped off a little bit with because it's my Jupiter return. Okay.
And it feels to me, if I think of what the rescue is, I always think about, or I lately find myself feeling that it's about, Jupiter can be about hope, but I think a much deeper thing than hope is faith. And what I'm saying, why I'm using the words that way, and I don't know how everybody defines those, but for what I'm getting at is that, to me, hope is often for something, like I know what is best for me and I hope for it. I hope this, I hope that. But coming back to all this unknownness that we are, all trying to live with better, right, and get along with better, I feel like faith is really faith in life, like faith in there's something going on here, but we don't necessarily know what it is. It's like being able to just kind of cooperate with that. And the other thing I was thinking about, because earlier you were talking, or it was being spoken of about, new stories that we need. We need to have different stories about ourselves, about our worlds, and all of that. And Jupiter, of course, is a storyteller in part. And but the thing I think about, in one of my favorite, one of the most inspiring people for me, writers, is David Abrams, who wrote The Spell of the Sensuous and Becoming Animal. He's an eco-philosopher. And he talks about, humans are the storytelling animal, right? Like every animal has a special power, right? And our special power is storytelling. And, that special power has to be used carefully, because our stories can become self-enclosing per the Sagittarius South Node stuff. We see a lot of self-enclosing stories, and the stories begin to have less and less of a relationship to that which they tell stories about, right? It becomes a self-enclosure of story. And when I see Jupiter in Pisces, I do feel like, but what I was going to say is, one of the things that's talked about by people who speak about this human as the storytelling animal is you can't exactly just decide to write a new story. You have to let a new story arise. And that feels like Jupiter in Pisces to me. It's like, if we're letting go enough, then a new story will come in, but you have to hear the new story. You don't make it up with your great wisdom and power and your ego's idea of what good and bad are and all that stuff. It's like you move into a state of deep listening to know what is the story, what wants to come next. I think it's how many of us read charts. We try not to come in with all our ideas about the chart, but actually try to see, like, what are these symbols wanting to say? What are these creatures? What are these animals in the chart? Like, what are they doing? So when I see that Jupiter in Pisces, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because I didn't even think about Jupiter squaring the nodes. And it's an important part of it, isn't it? Because it does open up some space to hear new stories and have faith that new ones are arising, and be able to sort of do that. So that's what comes to me. I really like the little ring.
Well,
I like being encouraged to have faith and not hope, because I think hopelessness is a much better, in Buddhism we speak of that, right? Like, hope is usually a problem. It's usually an expectation with pretty clothes on, and faith is a very different thing. So
Well, yeah, and one of the ways that we get faith is, I mean, faith. Okay, so we can have faith, but what I'm hoping for, because I do have a vision of it, is that there is some felt sense of collective grace, and that gives people faith, right? That there is some felt sense or experience of some collective grace. And, this is an energy also of compassion, opening us up to compassion and transcendence and, all of those things. You said, Jason, we can't write the new story because the story comes from the unknown, right?
Like it comes from all the other creatures in the world, right? It comes from all of the ancestors. It comes from the spirit guides and benevolent. Everybody's got part in this story. Every animal on earth is part of creating this next story. And it's the only chance we have. If we keep insisting that we're the ones who are, in charge of the story, then we get this fucked situation. Sorry, we're a little, if you do an EA thing, eventually Jeff Green's cursing is going to appear.
Of course. Well, yeah. It's a verb, it's a noun, it's an adjective, right? I mean, I grew up in the Italian North End of Bridgeport.
Something that I think is really neat to watch with any strong Pisces transits are the music and the films and the animations that are being released. And I've recently just been, I guess since becoming a father, this is a part of it, but I'm just loving all of the Disney Pixar films that are coming out. And so it's spoiler alert, just heads up, I'm not going to go so deep, but Encanto is just such a beautiful film. And it's coming out right now. Patricia, actually, will you regress maybe a week or two? Because the exact square is at 0. It's at very early Sag Gemini.
You want me to regress you right here online?
Right here, right?
Okay. All right, close your eyes.
I've had no bad past lives, so it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, of course. Where do you want me to go?
I don't know, just a week or two.
Okay, so I'll go...
Just, until 1 degree.
Oh, all right. There you go.
Just
like
there? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's good. Around then is the exact square between Jupiter and... So just to acknowledge, we're applying to the exact square, which will happen in the Sagittarius Gemini axis. The Encanto storyline is everyone has a miracle. Everyone has a special, again, spoiler, so just close your ears for a minute. Everyone has a gift in this one family. Even the house is conscious and does things for you. And at a certain age 5 or so, you get your gift is revealed, and the main character doesn't get a gift, and so she grows up in this family without a gift, and always felt like, oh, I'm not special. There's something wrong with me that I never got a gift. Other people can communicate with animals, can hear anything, can tell the future. Can control the weather, and the whole story is there is a fundamental lesson in realizing that the true gift was love and inclusion and acceptance, and the magic powers began going away because there's too much construct. There are too many ideas and beliefs. Like the gift was just given. Like no one knows why the gift was given. And the grandmother, who was sort of the matriarch of the community, believed that everyone needed to be doing something with their gift. Yeah, everyone needs to be serving and doing the best that they can to give to the community, because we've been given this gift, and to keep the gift going, to keep the magic going, we have to constantly give and give and give. But there's a lot of pressure and expectation and control. And so the whole movie unfolds where it's realized our love and inclusion and acceptance of one another, that's the real gift. So all the magic goes away, and then they have this whole realization, and the house breaks down, and then everyone comes together, and the whole community comes together, and they work together to rebuild the house, and then magically all the magic returns. So I just think about that flow between hope, which is impeding hopelessness. Hope is impeding hopelessness. It's just waiting for you. That's my view. And it's okay not to be too pessimistic about it, but if we give so much investment in what we're hoping for, I agree, it is very different than faith. It is very different than trust. And we come to these points where, we put so much meaning, so much value, so much attention in the story that we've painted, and maybe well intended, it just doesn't work out that way. And then we have to surrender. And it feels like, oh, the house broke down, the magic's gone. Everything was beautiful, and now it's gone. And it can be these moments of crisis where we just feel this despair. Jupiter and Pisces, I'm far away from God. I've lost it. I've lost the grace. And we can go into a very nihilistic and pessimistic place. And those are the moments really where there's an opportunity to learn a little more about what the truth actually is, which is not what we're trying to make it. And you can't define that. You can't say, and this is what it is. So I just wanted to highlight that we're moving in. So that's what's alive right now. And it's interesting that after the exact square, the nodes then regress into Taurus Pisces. So it's almost Taurus Scorpio. And so it's almost like there's some sort of deep spiritual mutable lesson of facing the dissonance of our beliefs and our projections onto reality, and maybe coming across some deeper transcendental realizations that, I find whenever I land in the truth, the way that I know that I've gotten there is there's peace. Right? There's a feeling of space. There's a feeling of freedom. I look outside and I feel love, and I feel unity. I feel compassion. I feel acceptance, and I don't need to go into the future. I don't need to replay the past. That's always a sign that I've tasted truth, that I've come here. So it's a good thing to be kind of working with right now, and then we just kind of switch into a different phase entirely when the nodes move.
I feel like what you brought up, Ari, makes so much sense too with that shift, because when we're in this place of, potential nihilism and we don't really know what's going on and we have to get into that faith to get into the present moment, I think that one of the number one lessons that we're all going to be experiencing is that the safest place for us to be is inside our body. Like all of this external, everything else around us that we can't control, South Node Scorpio, come back into our body. And I think that's something that I've noticed is one of the truest epidemics of our time is disembodiment. And so coming back into this, I feel safe here. So I think all the people who do any sort of work around emotional processing, anybody who is a shadow worker, anybody who's doing, somatic therapy, anything where it's linking body, mind, they're going to be busy, probably with a lot of work.
Year of psychosomatic therapy boom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just looking at the trusting of ourselves with that Pisces, with the Taurus, there's a really big opportunity here, I think for this almost like internal, inside out sort of enlightenment that doesn't come exactly like you were saying. Like it doesn't come from this idea of like, this is what enlightenment looks like, this is what it's supposed to be, and this is what it's supposed to feel like, but these sort of momentary glimpses of it that we experience from just really being inside our bodies.
Yeah, to me, Scorpio Taurus axis is about, right? It's the combination of that psyche and soma.
It's almost like after all these deep shifts, how are we going to embody and make, with that Taurus North Node, it's saying, how are we going to make the choice to be content with ourselves, to be here, to not get wrapped up and out of balance and off-centered by all the deep psychic content that's needing to emerge at this time. It just really invites us to
and back to something you were talking about, Ari, that the love and the compassion was really the gift, right? The love was the connectedness, that transcended the gift. The gift is the shiny thing. Whoops, wait.
And there's a house to build. There are
shiny
things to
thing.
do.
There's the shiny thing. The gift is the shiny thing, but behind that is the compassion and the love. And what I forgot to say about my story, because it so fits this chart, right, which I was contemplating as I was strolling through the forest this morning, is so I found the little shiny thing, and then I got in the car, and then Sympathy for the Devil was playing. But really, now let's think about it in terms of this Scorpio Taurus axis and the things that I was talking about before with Jupiter square. So we have been doing a lot of collective underworld mining, right? You know, this is Pluto and Capricorn time since, like I said, 2008. So, you know, it's been erupting. And so, and possibly, you know, for people that are doing this kind of work also on the personal level. So with Jupiter square here, how do we integrate those parts that have, or how do I, it's not going to say integrate. When part of the reconciliation of shadow is compassion, right? You have to bring it back into the fold. And it comes by stretching one's own awareness of what self is. And the way that we stretch our awareness of what self is to walk in somebody else's shoes, right? It's through that empathic, the empathetic part of ourselves where we can really feel or experience something that's beyond our sense of reality, that then makes what I call the little s self into the larger s self, which then is all encompassing. And then that part that was cast out into the shadow can be reconciled and reintegrated, right? Because it's embraced not only with consciousness, but with compassion. So maybe something during this period of time, as we head into the US's Pluto return, not again, we've been cooking it. And as we head into, you know, eventually Pluto will ingress into Aquarius 2023, maybe, you know, we can come to a point of having compassion for what we have become collectively. Because I hear a lot of condemnation about, oh, we're doing this and even collectively, you know, we've become so polarized and, you know, hate and this and that and brother against brother, and families can't get together for holidays anymore, not just because of COVID, but because of politics, you know, all of that maybe this is because Sympathy for the Devil is being able to understand and have compassion for that which is outcast, right? And this might be the pinnacle of what could be our great work collectively, and even individually, right? Let's not put that all on the collective, because we are the collective individually. So if we each individually do this, right? Find some way to have compassion for those outcast parts of us and those things we have outcast or still want to continue to outcast.
Absolutely. I think it's forgiveness. It's just at the end of the day, everything. And something I was really even just reflecting on that, because you asked, you're like, how do we do this work? And I was like, how do we do this work? This is big work. So first of all, just realizing, oh, wherever I am in this journey is okay and perfect and right, because this is where I am. But even like, okay, how can I become aware of what it feels like in my body to feel forgiven? What does that do for me in how I'm showing up and being in the world? Because Pisces is about that beingness, not necessarily only about what we do, but our state. And so how does that Taurus and the Pisces, how do they go together? The Scorpio and Pisces, that, you know, natural trine energy eventually, which they'll experience, it's a little different, but the Taurus and the Pisces, it's a little bit more like, oh, I'm so different from you. I almost don't even understand what you're saying, what you're talking about. So how do we find that, like, wow, this big transcendent, I'm not going to be able to prove this to somebody else. I'm going to have to just feel what it feels like in my body, know what forgiveness feels like in my body, and know that it's actually one of the greatest gifts I can give to somebody. It is the stuff of miracles. It's like, even in the book, A Course in Miracles, like, it's like the one who is forgiven, right? It has the one who has it all is the one who's enlightened. And it feels so good. And I know for myself and many people I've connected to, a lot of times it is so hard to forgive yourself for anywhere that you've felt like inadequate. Because if we also think about that polarity point of Jupiter with the Virgo, the not enough-ness, I think there's so much mutability and duality with the Pisces that it's like we're going to feel pulled in all of the directions. And I guess the Scorpio, especially with the planetary rulers, the Mars Venus piece of this, if we're going to talk about that, plus
Yeah, we're getting there.
Pluto.
Yep.
Okay, I'll hold on for a moment, because that
Yeah,
one,
well, hang on to that thought for a moment. Make a note. One thing I want to mention, you were talking about, so to me, the simpatico between Pisces and Taurus is the natural sextile, and to me, the simpatico place would be simplicity. Right, that resonates with both the Pisces Taurus, and certainly as we're coming into this North Node, this transiting North Node. I mean, I have this vibe to me, the Scorpio to Taurus. If I were to give it, just like I gave the Gemini Sag transiting nodal axis a theme, which was question everything. That was my theme coming into that transit. The theme for this transit is what do I want and what do I need? Right, so there's going to be a kind of rescaling of perhaps the reevaluation of what, this is certainly desire nature, and then, so that could be want, and then the simplification of what do I really need, right? So I think that there's, this kind of evaluation of that going on. Before I move to that transit time I was talking about, do you have anything you want to say, Jason, about the nodes? Or I'm not putting you on the spot, I just didn't want to make sure you didn't get overlooked.
Well, I think that the biggest thing that comes up for me is within Taurus North Node of the ground of being in our animal body. That's really the way I would describe that, and really in this sensate realm and in the locatable right here, right now. And someone said about not getting caught up in all the psychic content with the Scorpio that will be there, right? Because that is, I think that's inescapable. But nevertheless, in Taurus, there's a place to be in the ground. And the other word, and maybe it does lead to the Venus and Mars situation of the year, but I also feel that this is an erotic axis, right? So Taurus and Scorpio is erotic, and by that I mean to include sexuality. And one of the things I feel very aware of with all of the last couple of years in Gemini and Sag is how much the world went online, and how much it's words and images that are the primary situation right now. And there's people also touching each other less. There's a lot of research about much less sexual connection going on between people, and even self-sex as well, because Taurus, of course, can be both of these. But it's like there's a piece here about the place of Eros that feels really important to me, because that is creative energy. It is life force. It is part of what we need when everything is falling apart necessarily, and when structures are not there. There's something about the interbeingness of Eros, and whatever that means for each person. But I find myself really wanting a much greater degree of eroticized experience for people. And I do not, of course, I don't mean, the commodification of sexuality that is everywhere. I'm really speaking of much more of an embodied sensate awareness of oneself, one's urges, one's desires, one's what's interesting, because from, this is the dynamic, right? Venus and Mars are the electromagnetic axis, right? They're Venus is this magnetic energy and Mars is this electrical energy that goes forward. It's like, it's got dynamism in it. New things get created. It's got that kind of possibility, the rulers of these nodes. And in the midst of all the other things going on, remembering the erotic and making space for that feels very, very important to me. And as we all, I hope, know, when you enter into the erotic, and particularly when you can surrender to the natural movements between yourself, with just yourself or with others or whatever it might be, when you're able to do that, you don't really get to know where you go, right? And it doesn't have to be this goal-directed thing. And that's, again, a source of new stories. I find that that's, again, a place where you can hear what wants to happen, what's wanting to emerge. If that's not a part of our reality, because it's such a natural sensate thing. Like, again, I'm of course very grateful that we can meet on the internet and do our thing right now, but the amount of time on screens and all of that, I really hope that this would be a time where there's an opportunity to come out of that more, right? It's like, and perhaps it does speak to the fatigue that people say they have with all of this, but even though they say they have the fatigue, we've all been naturalized and normalized into it. So there is a need to make it abnormal again. That's what I think. I think it'd be abnormal to be this much looking at a screen. That I do not wish this to be my normal, and it isn't my normal. Actually, it's not what I do. I'm a holdout. I didn't get an iPhone until 2019, but it's like this is an opportunity that we have to go back to the body, and I'm hearing Nura really emphasize that, and I'm appreciating that too, because that's this thing is not a thing. It's a being. And again, the screen is a great agent of this transactionalism and commodification, right? It's like, so to me, there's an opportunity with the nodes going on and on, but Eros and the erotic, and specifically sexual, not just vague Jungian Eros. I want people to fuck, or whatever they do, whatever they like to do. I want you to do that with yourself. I want you to do that with other people. Whatever is consensual and feels loving and real to you. It's like there's some opportunity in this.
Well, Eros, maybe in that Jungian sense, but Eros overall is life force.
Yeah.
Right? Life force, and this, to me, talk about commodification, the inner side of Venus that we rarely talk about, because Venus is always talked about in conjunction of, she's seen in the patriarchal world as, very much in her ruler of Libra aspect and not ruler of Taurus. And the thing, I did a lot of research on that. And also one of the things that I came up with or saw was that if you type in the word sensual on Google and look for images, they're going to be, juicy red lips and a commoditized, sexualized woman's body, right? That's not sensual to me. Sensual is naked in the ocean or in the wind, or every sense. There's intelligence in our senses. And this is part of what this Eros and this sensual nature is about, right? Is intelligence and knowing that is embodied, right? And when I say embodied, that arises from our natural sensual nature, right? Archaic ancestors, they didn't have newspapers or phones or this or that, right? They didn't have, right? But it was the smell of the wind changing, the way that an eagle's feather did something, right? The feel of the earth beneath your feet. That's all sensual knowing and connectedness. So to me, that is also a big part of embodiment and this, moving to the North Node here.
I'm so
Ari, I think
forward
you
to
wanted
this.
to, oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Nura.
Oh, no, I was just so looking forward to this and also just appreciating, like, this is going to be one hell of a new moon, I think, this day.
Yeah, well, and here we are, right? So this is the period of time I was talking about coming up in March, which I think is some bit of a conclusion of, I think it's a concluding time, or maybe some definitive time of this underworld processing that I was talking about before, as this conjunction happens, and then in one day moves from balsamic to new phase, right? And then, as you just pointed out, Nura, we go back here. This is here's a new moon in Pisces. That's also a kind of ending signature. As we know, Pisces, just archetypally, is kind of alpha and omega at the same time, right? So there's some kind of concluding going here, and as all of us have pointed out, these are all the rulers, the ancient rulers, Scorpio, Pluto and Mars, and then Venus, rule of the North Node, as they all conjunct. I think something around this period of time is going to have us maybe on individual levels also really coming to understand, like what I said, that what do I want, desire, and what do I need? And I don't mean that in a punitive sense as much as I mean it in the, if we are really participating in creating some kind of new collective reality, it isn't going to be consumeristic. Right. It's going to be something, and when we talk about embodying and being in our sensual nature, our sensual nature, if we're really listening to that and not the commercials and what our head is saying, I want that, oh, they have that, I gotta have that, oh, I want to, blah, 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 right? If we're not doing that and we're really just listening on a very simple level, right, on that very sensual, simple level, I think our consumerism is a lot less when we're doing that. It's, again, Taurus, the empowered Taurus is just slow and sensual and just valuing the smallest, beautiful, the nuances, like taking the time to really value and appreciate what one has. So gratitude is another word that comes to mind here too, right? And like I said, so that having had that sympathy for the devil, right? The ability to love and nurture all those disowned parts back into the collective, back into the whole, then we move here, right? To this new phase where a kind of new cycle of understanding what are our wants and needs then comes in.
Patricia?
So I'm sorry, I know Ari, I know Ari was about to say something a few times and you got run over. I just want to make sure. Yes,
I'm good.
yes,
I'll come back to that when we speak about Saturn.
Okay, hang on a second. Go ahead, Sue.
Speaking of wants and needs, does anybody want to take a 2-minute break?
Yeah, I got it.
Let's do that. I'm actually okay with hanging out because I'm not being pestered by my little 4-legged wants and needs.
Okay, cool.
Which would normally be going for his walk right now. So let's take a little break if we can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Great. So just on the break, I was thinking about this eros and sensual and all the things you brought up. And, to me, I always correlate Venus's rulership of Taurus as the inner side. And it's the etheric body. So it's the energetic counterpart to the physical body, and the senses of which it rules, right? We have inner senses that correlate with our outer senses. So, they have names such as, our sense of vision is clairvoyance when it's inner, hearing is clairaudience. And these are the more flashy or well-known forms of intuitional knowing. And the one that's the least valued is kinesthetic knowing, which is Taurus, right? This is Venus's, and that's less valued in our, hyper materialistic, reductionist, rational society, because it's the least explained, right? So even, in the transpersonal world, it's said that the body is the most unconscious, right? And it is, because think of how many functions of the body are ruled subconsciously, right? We're not aware of it all. And so kinesthetic knowing might be something that is also a practice for us to do during this time as we're coming into this transiting nodal shift. And again, especially as these rulers kind of jump from here to here, and Mars, as we know, is also not just desires, but it's instinctual nature, right? Which is also another form of knowing that is less valued, right? Because it's just your instinct. Or so your kinesthetic knowing is that, like, you just follow your feet, you just follow your hands, you just follow your senses. And what they bring to you, right? The senses are that passageway from the outer world into the inner world. And the more we bring our awareness to them, the more we realize how rich they are in knowing and in guiding, I guess would be another way. I don't know if I'm coming up with the right words, because I don't know if you can convey these kinds of things in words, but I would say kinesthetic knowing, right? To value that more during this period of time too.
Absolutely. I was totally feeling that with even if we look at how there's so much sextile energy between all of the yin signs, like the Capricorn planets with the south node, and then the Pisces planets with the north node. And I always think of this sextile as a reminder of, like, it's not a given, it's an opportunity. And exactly what you were just saying, like, oh, if I can reach into myself and sense, like, oh, instead of just needing to see something or have it in front of me to sort of prove it to me, if I can trust it from the inside out, I feel like that might help mitigate some of the potential with, the scientific materialism that comes up with the Capricorn energy of, like, it must be proven to me physically before I'm able to step into this perhaps Piscean belief, or the Taurian embodiment of that expression. So I thought that was a really cool, just noticing this date. I don't know, something big I think is going to coalesce around this date.
Yeah, well, and we're coming into the Jupiter Neptune conjunction, right? Also, that will be happening. And then I don't know, I know that Sue and Robin were going to moderate you guys talking about the Saturn square the node period. But before we jump to that, is there something else that anybody wants to add about either this period of time or the nodal shift?
Well, it's just meaningful to note that right after this time, Mars and Venus are together at the same
Yeah.
exact.
Oh, right. I wanted to show that. Thank you for reminding me of that. Sorry. We can even jump by weeks, and you'll let me do it another way.
Well, it happened at 0
Let's do
degrees
it by
Aquarius.
days.
Yeah,
right.
0 degrees Aquarius is the first day where Venus passes Mars.
Right. So keep your eyes on these two, because this is unusual. So we always get at least once a year the Venus-Mars conjunction. We rarely get them tracking each other for so long together, right? So when we have this Venus and Mars coming together, and we can say this, all of these things we were talking about, Venus as ruler as Libra and Taurus, combined with desire nature and instinctual nature and our will and our eros, right? That's eros energy as well. And Venus also eros and magnetism, and Mars eros and going out and getting it. Passion for life. But we rarely have them doing this, right? Tracking for this long together. And so there they are tracking all the way through Aquarius until Venus. Oh, and then they sandwich Saturn, which to me is also bringing this different vision of reality, right? To me, something about what we have reevaluated, reassessed, reworked, whatever we've done during this Venus retrograde time, that is coming into a vision, right? And Aquarius is about the future, right? Aquarius is about also, visioning. It's about connection. It's about our like-minded others. It's about humanity in large. These are just a few keywords I'm putting out there. But also our creating our future. It is also technology. And then Venus breaks that kind of, and she's the one that breaks out into Pisces, right? So we have that through all of March coming into April, which is interesting too. So what were you saying about that, Ari? What did you think that this was significant? What was significant?
Just noting that it is,
Mm.
and just the fact that from mid Capricorn up until early Aquarius, they're literally together with Mars just leading, and then Venus picks up speed. I don't know, there's just a lot of symbology there. Venus has gone into the underworld, now emerging. Mars comes and says, hey, let's hang out together. And then Venus gains that steam and that power and moves ahead. If we think about it in terms of our own self-value, our own self-trust, our own capacity for embodiment, and the immense evolutionary energies that are happening through this time, through January, through February, there's something that begins to happen in March, just as Venus passes, that is almost a return to integration, some level of, okay, I know who I am now. I'm coming into a deeper embodiment, a deeper, healthy self-value, healthy self-esteem. It just, there's a lot of metaphorical correlation that Venus at that point with Mars kind of, I think of Mars as basically saying, hey, let's walk together for a while. I'm not going to be stronger than you. I'm not going to overpower you. I'm going to be an equal. You've been through a lot. It's been I've been watching you. It's been a tough journey up there in Capricorn with Pluto. I'm going to hang out here with you. I'm going to match you.
And we're going to visit Saturn together.
We'll visit Saturn. We can check in with the Oracle. Yeah.
Yeah, and liberation and individuation are also part of these keywords here too, right?
I
Anything
think
else?
a lot
Yeah.
around the fact that Mars will be sort of in that exaltation degree in Capricorn earlier than this, but when they're very close to that conjunction to Pluto, so that 27, 28 degree point. So it's like Mars will kind of get this oomph and this energy and perhaps be able to take the lead in that sense. And I kind of look at that with the connection to the South Node and also the connection to Pluto of like, we'll get this beautiful, like we're not going to be, constantly stretched between both of these polarities equally, the Taurus, Scorpio at all times. It's like there's going to be moments where we're really doing the South Node work, where we're going to be focusing on the letting go parts of things and also the pulling in the gifts from the past and pulling in the gifts of the empowerment of the people that are around us and what we've already mastered and things like that. And so I feel like when Mars is in Capricorn, there might be maybe this energy around taking radical responsibility and taking the actions, like the physical actions that we know that we need to take, whether that's positioning ourselves with people to help us, whether it's, finding a person to talk to, or whether it's just being willing to look at ourselves. I view that as another form of this radical responsibility. And then they're doing this switch off, which then the planetary ruler of the North Node, Venus in Pisces, she'll be going through her exaltation. So they'll kind of shift a little bit in the focus. It's like, okay, we do some of the work where we're releasing what is heavy, what is stagnant, we're letting go of something, but we're also coming into power. And then we're about to go and fly away with it, or we're about to bring it into this more transcendent place. And so I feel like with this really beautiful dynamic tension and joining with you could say the masculine and the feminine, divine masculine, divine feminine. Is this an opportunity for us to sort of, settle our differences and cooperate, collaborate? I tend to think that the majority of all problems for all humanity come down to the imbalance of the masculine and feminine polarity. So every of these conjunctions and these relationship dances between Mars and Venus over this next year and a half, I think are really going to give us these opportunities in our personal lives to look at, okay, I'm an ambassador for the divine feminine in my life. And all men are ambassadors for the divine masculine, and anywhere in between that we're discussing on the spectrum of gender and all of these things, but we all have the masculine and the feminine. And so how can we be ambassadors for that and see, oh, every time I'm able to reconcile this polarity in my personal life, I am doing something for the collective, and it does make a difference. So I think that's what we have to look forward to. And that's where the radical responsibility piece, it's like, if I want to see something change, I have to literally be that change. And it has to be in my home first, and then it'll ripple out.
Well, that sort of reminds me about with this aspecting, I mean, one of the things that immediately speaks to me about, we've seen Venus and Mars in this type of relationship, and they do this sometimes where they're 3 times, but it's hard not to think of like what's going on with the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade and various reactivations of men's desire to control women's bodies. And it'd be hard not to wonder about the relationship of this aspecting in this situation. One of the things it takes me back to that I remember studying a few years ago when they did 3 conjunctions in Libra and Aries and Scorpio, was in 1978, 77, when the ERA was almost passed, right? Equal Rights Amendment was almost passed and then was defeated soundly. So one of the things that comes up for me is that and seeing Saturn involved doesn't make me super optimistic about that from a large scale perspective. And it does take me back to what Nura was just saying, that what we're really, I'm afraid that my way of thinking about this is, so much is coming to a head in this time, in this Pluto return time for the US. It's like, I would expect more regressions. That's what I would expect as a therapist. I expect that as the level of change that's being asked is so high, that there will be equally strong retrenchments and retrenchments of the defensive structures that kept the old thing going. That's just kind of how that seems to work in the psyche. And so I kind of imagine a lot of those types of things not going well in a certain sense. At the same time, I always go back to the caterpillar analogy, where they've talked a lot about, and I think of Pluto and Capricorn as the caterpillar being dissolved into soup, right? And that it doesn't incrementally go butterfly, right? It's completely broken down. And then what's left of these little imaginal cells in there, which the caterpillar's immune system actually attacks, right? And says, no, you're not in control of your body, and you don't get to decide what we're going to look like in the future. But slowly those imaginal cells do find each other and begin to re-emerge, and that's kind of what I feel when I think about this very personal embodied approach to things, that if we're each taking, you do find the other things, they sort of come together while the rest of this thing goes through what it goes through, right? And to be clear, I'm not talking about, log out from the world and just be with your happy little group and, you all have utopia and the rest of the world will fall apart. And I happen to be exposed to a lot of people who think that's what they're going to do. And I'm really speaking of something that does imagine that everybody can participate in this, but it's like, there's something about again and again. So when I was looking at that chart that you had up a minute ago, where the 27, the Venus and Pluto and Mars all in the same spot, and with Venus making her successive conjunctions to Pluto and Mars. Yeah, that one.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. a new moon one, the one who I I will probably send out a mass email to everyone. If you know any baby born on this date, I want to meet this child.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just call me one of the magi.
That's it.
But when I look at that one, I really do think with that Pluto, Mars, Venus, it's like, that's pretty massive. That's a lot on the line. And again, our bodies will be so intensely activated with that. That's again, I feel like that return to the body becomes so important because there's a lot to process, right? There's a lot to process, and not everybody is equally able to process. That's just how it is. I don't mean that in a judgmental way, but the capacities that we have will be stretched. I mean, if we know this is happening, we have a little bit of an advantage for being able to move with it and dance with it and shift with it. But I do feel like when I think of this Venus Mars, I feel optimistic in terms of what's possible for people individually. I feel differently collectively. I don't mean pessimism. I just don't have any expectation that it will go a certain way. I wouldn't feel confident in either direction personally.
Well, and that's all conjunct. This is all conjunct the US's Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Right after the Pluto return, which is February,
Yeah.
right?
But then we can be creative, right? We can imagine something like that changing at the Supreme Court might lead to the recreation of the entire instrument of the Supreme Court, right?
Well,
That's
that Supreme Court decision is supposed to come down in the summer, right?
In the fall, in June is usually when they do them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, again, it's like the bad thing might be the opening of the transformative thing, right? That's the kind of thing that one can imagine. I mean, but it probably looks pretty rough.
Well, and then, as you know, and we're coming into midterms. We will be in November this next year in the US. And then there is, we can't escape also the nature of Scorpio Taurus, which is all of the stuff that's happening, because, we could talk on the individual level, we are certainly able to move more material. And especially if you have, a level of personal consciousness. But when we talk about the collective, it usually goes to the lowest common denominator. The expression of the archetypes, right, usually flow to the lowest common denominator. It's a kind of phenomena of crowd psychology, right, that it'll flow to the lowest consciousness of the crowd. And even somebody of higher consciousness can get into crowd frenzy and have all kinds of shadow stuff triggered by being in the crowd. And so when we look at Scorpio Taurus, we can't ignore all of the behind the scenes manipulations that are going on with voting rights, with, these things that are coming up. And part of the Pluto return karmic reckoning for our nation that we've been in is that long shadow of racism and slavery and subjugation of other for, plutocratic power, right, etc. So all of those things have been coming to a head. And then we're going to have this transiting nodes in Scorpio Taurus. So there's still more to be excavated from the collective underworld on the political economic level, right? But it doesn't mean that, those of individual, need to hang out in the underworld there with them.
Yeah, I think everybody's being called into what kind of warrior they are, whether that's a warrior of light, a social justice warrior, a rainbow warrior. I think there's a lot of potential for this sort of joining of the, the whole, let's put all of the gifts together and be the strongest version that we can. And then, of course, knowing that the lowest common denominator is, while it's true, it can be truly felt. I don't know that it's true in an absolute sense, right? Like, because even us as individuals, I thoroughly believe in the tipping point, right? Like, it only takes a certain percentage of people to be anchoring a certain frequency for everything to just completely shift. And that's where I think, even if you are somebody who's like a warrior of the light, it might mean, you're meditating and doing your work on yourself, and it's influencing all around you. But I do think that it does have this, the butterfly effect. It does have a ripple effect into the bigger story. And I feel like it's kind of like the building toward utopia. Like, we're never going to get there, right? Because otherwise we'll just evolve ourselves right out of this life. But we never stop trying. And we have to stay in I guess this is how my warrior shows up. It's like, I've got to stay in this like motivational space, this motivational role to say like, it's going to be really, really hard, but we could do this. It's going to be really, really hard. Your absolute worst nightmares are going to, come to say hello. And then you're going to have a choice to say, I'm the soul in charge. Thank you for showing yourself to me, but I'm going to take it from here. And I'm going to decide from this next place of, rather than, oh, everything's just going to go down the toilet and the sort of the nihilism energy. Cause I've seen a lot of that too. And I feel like it's almost like we have to be, I feel, especially in any role of leadership too, which I think the Capricorn energy is really going to invite the leaders to rise up in a big way. I feel like there's this imperative as leaders to really anchor that, the optimism, and to anchor the enthusiasm and inspiring people to see that in themselves too. I think that's really that Jupiter Neptune piece too, coming together and saying like, we have to believe that this is possible. And then it will be, right? It's like the believing is seeing rather than the seeing is believing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The Sagittarius is like, feeling intense right now.
I'm Sag too. I get
Sagittarius
it.
sign, by the way.
I'm Sag too. I get it.
Oh, I'm with a bunch of Sagittarians. Oh
You
my
are.
Yes,
You are.
of course. Come on, gallop with us, baby. You talk about animal body. We got it. We know.
Yeah, you said
We're
the
just trying to
wild
soak
of the
up the remainder of this transiting south node because we're just like not wanting to get out of it. Party, we
Speaking
don't
of,
want it to
you
end.
said it, Jason. Do you see this? Wait,
Oh yeah, that's right.
stay wild.
Yeah.
So what about Robin and Sue? Do you want to take over moderating for this part about the Saturn square, the nodes? And is there a chart you would like me to put up, even though I have it here now? It's not the exact square. Is this suitable to discuss that? Or do you have a chart you want to put up?
I'm happy with you continuing. If you want to continue, Robin.
I can probably be here for another half hour.
Can I?
Okay.
If I can share my screen, I have.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's drop that then. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay. So an essential transit for 2022 is Saturn squaring the nodes pretty much the whole year. Not long after the nodes enter into the Scorpio Taurus axis, right now Saturn's moving direct, so it's full steam ahead into a pretty tight orb with the nodes. So the exact square is on April 11th here in the USA. And I just put it in their natural houses so we can have a sense of it. So we have Aquarius squaring the nodal axis, south node in Scorpio, north node in Taurus. And I just want to highlight the other, stationary points, just so we can get a sense for the energy first. When Saturn stations, let's see, this is Saturn. There we go. Saturn stationing retrograde in June. By the time Saturn stations retrograde, they're just 3 degrees apart. Okay. So as Saturn's slowing down, moving towards that retrograde time, it's still pretty tight with the nodes. And then when Saturn stations direct in October, it is about 5 degrees away from the nodes. From that point on, then the separation just continues to increase. So really, we have the bulk of 2022. Let's tune into the essence of what this is about. I thought about 3 picturesque analogies to describe the energy of this archetype first, and then we'll go into some of the deeper psychological dimensions. So one example, one story is a person that comes from a very conservative background and they're interested in astrology. They don't want to talk about their interest in astrology because if they do, they're going to be excommunicated, rejected, kicked out. They're going to lose the security and the stability of the world they know. No one's going to want to be their friend. They're going to be rejected by their family. They're going to face that existential Saturn in Aquarius. I'm an outsider. I don't really fit in to society. I don't fit into this world. So that tension is, do I repress my individuality and try to fit in, try to normalize, or do I take responsibility for my own nature, my own individuality? But what's the risk here? Death, loss, separation. So when we're looking at this nodal axis in the Scorpio Taurus, we're looking at the stress between, on one level, do I want to hold on to security, all right, everything that's sort of safe, all of the resources that I need, or socially, or familially, I know that I'm okay here. I'm not threatened with insecurity. Or am I willing to face the possibility of loss and death? And in that regard, am I going to get stuck in that fear? Am I going to become paranoid to the point where either I'm totally afraid to talk about astrology in public because I'm going to get hung? Right? This could be subconscious memories from that past lifetime when you were an astronomer and you were a follower of Copernicus and you're one of the people that were probably killed at a certain point, or you were put in jail for many years. Right? Is there going to be a paranoia and a fear of really being yourself? Because there are grave consequences here. It could be life and death, or it can be within the realm of your traumatic imprinting. It can feel like life and death. Most traumatic imprintings, it's what it feels like. It isn't always actually so. Right? We can be rejected, and like little signposts of that can be immense for us. Right? The ways in which life might reflect back to us, you're different, or you don't belong, or I don't agree with who you are as a person. You're wrong as a person. Even little judgments like that can be filtered through the unresolved traumas of the past. Okay. We'll come back to that example. That's just one little story, one little archetype. Okay, here's another example. Let's see if I could remember it. The person that is living a life, doing everything according to what's acceptable, what's normal, and they become radicalized. They realize, you know what, I want to fill in the blank. I want to start a new business. I want to revolutionize how I live as a human being. And it could sort of be this new vision for how to be here, for what to do. And they become so engaged, so excited, so engrossed that they get ahead of themselves. It's like, all right, we're going to use artificial intelligence to fuel the way we make pancakes, and it's going to be the revolution, because a big part of the problems of this world is we're spending too much time with pans and oil, and we need robots to take over, and this will free up more space for human connection. And it's like there's like a radicalization that says, here's the answer to the separation, to the problems of this world, the problems of humanity, the problems of the environment, the problems of global warming, the problems of technology. And the danger in this thinking is it can become so short-sighted and so fixed on a solution that it's actually dissociative. It separates from the present moment. It separates from true intimacy, from true connection, and it doesn't realize the extent of trauma that it's creating. Right? You have your child, wanting to play, and you say, no, robots should do it. Or the mining, I'm just making this up on the spot, guys, so bear with me. The mining that's required to get all the metals that we need to create all of the technologies that we think are absolutely necessary to save the world. How much trauma, how much social, environmental destruction and trauma do we create on behalf of our scientific and social innovations? And so that's the other archetype. And again, coming back to the Scorpio Taurus axis, this very much can speak to both commodification of Earth resources and where we take things. And if we're not in right relationship to the fact that everything in nature is regeneration is natural. It's inherent. Everything dies, but there's no waste in life. There's no such thing as waste. Like a waste is like a crazy concept that somehow we manage to believe in and create. Plastic and things that don't biodegrade. In the scope of many yugas, whatever, sure, everything will eventually regenerate. But to create a reality where we're commodifying and using things for the sake of innovation and development, but we're unaware of the hurt and the trauma and the debt that we create. Now, debt is a Scorpio concept, which is another interesting, in part it's Scorpio. I can also think of other archetypes where it relates to. To have debt, is there something resonant from the past that's unresolved? For you to get what you want, for you to fulfill that desire, you've had to give something and lose something, which is actually taking your energy and keeping you from this present moment. It's somewhat akin to getting what I want is so important that I'm going to sacrifice a part of my sovereignty and wholeness, because the nature of life, the nature of reality isn't bound by the unresolved past. I mean, that's a part of the nature of karma where we are, and that's actually a part of what Scorpio is about. We are, in fact, bound, but the deeper teachings, as we clear that, we uncover we're naturally wired to be free and clear and whole in this moment. We can create a lot of debt for ourselves on this earth, in our relationships, socially, when we put so much attention towards the thing that we think we need to improve our lives and our conditions. The third example is just the archetype of total depression and disconnect. Dissatisfaction with the status quo, the way humanity is going, the way politics are, the way that I need to make money to support my family, what we have come to believe it means to be a human being. There can be such a sense of depression where either we just go along with the status quo and we try to normalize, we try to fit in, but we're suppressing our individuality. And it could often be because we don't know there's another way. Or it could be it's almost the other end of that paranoia. If we really suppress our individuality, the person that's an astrologer, but they're afraid of revealing that to their Christian family or their mainstream Christian family that thinks it's the work of the devil, right? There can just be such an assumption and an acceptance on a Saturn level of, this is just, we're not going to change that. I can't change. I can't be different. I can't, because the world that I know is the world that I know. And I'm not even willing to allow myself to consider what's outside of that box. So we're looking at this archetype that really brings up, I think on one level, a lot of fear, a fear of stepping beyond the threshold of what's known, the paranoia, the fear, and the projections that can manifest relative to what we think are the consequences of being. And by the way, the other end of that is our own elitism. I've let go of making breakfast for myself. I only operate under advanced artificial intelligence. I don't even do, that's the way of the future. Or this is the way that I eat food now. This is the way. We can kind of accidentally create a little closed circle. One of the issues with Aquarius is when our circle becomes closed, like where the natural affinity and resonance becomes a construct to the point where we are no longer allowing for harmonics and resonance to lead the way in life and creation. But we say, this is the little exclusive upper class or upper echelon or higher intelligent or more evolved world that I'm living in. To the rest of everyone else, I don't really care about that anymore. So we run that risk of elitism as well. And that can, of course, manifest on so many levels. it can be a social movement, a political party, a way of living. So that elitism is another form of separation. And it's the other side of that coin of, I don't want to be kicked out. I don't want to be outcast. I don't want to be the outsider. I don't want to be different. It's kind of like higher than or lower than. I'm better than, or I'm afraid of being hurt. Right? So that's one dimension. And just the fear, there's an immense amount of pressure that can build up in this signature throughout the year. We really want to look at the station points when planets are really connecting with Saturn. There's a lot going on here that's pushing us to here are the key words. I'm going to say this a couple times in different ways as we dialogue. Take responsibility to structure a reality with respect to who we actually are and who we are, meaning who I am and who you are, and an understanding of a friendly universe where, yes, change happens. The constructs and the expectations that we've imposed upon ourselves and each other may not help so much, but to embrace that there is a mode of thinking that's friendly and inclusive, that's more functional. It's responsible, it's thoughtful, Saturn. It's very thoughtful. And it's not looking to improve a part of the whole to the neglect of the rest of it. It's thinking holistically. And it's wanting to experience and do the work. Long term is Saturn. Anything Saturn is long term. To do the work, to structure reality with respect to what is intrinsic to who we are, a greater potential, which means doing the hard work of facing our fears of abandonment, ways that we suppress ourselves in order to be accepted. Working with the energy of depression, I think, would be a very important theme. And in terms of the psychosomatic therapist boom in 2022, understanding depression, understanding the nature of suppression will be a very important area of discussion and healing that needs to be addressed in this next year. Understanding the effects socially, politically, environmentally of our technologies, and being willing to think, what's a better way? Am I actually protecting a deep sense of aloneness and alienation by focusing so much on the solutions that I think are out there to the neglect of a deeper care and respect to life? So one last point that I'll speak to before I open it up to the greater conversation amongst my friends here. When we're looking at a square root of the nodes, one of the beautiful teachings that Jeff Green brought forward is the teaching of the resolution node. And there's a difference depending on where the nodes are. It's a very interesting thing to tune into here. So the resolution node is, in essence, the node, obviously both nodes are activated. It's squaring both nodes. So there's an integration process necessarily happening at all times with both nodes. But one node, the node that symbolizes the first quarter square, the node that Saturn is separating from, in that case, this is the south node here. Saturn is separating from the south node. So within the context of the cycle, we consider this the resolution node. This is the starting point. This is where we bring our attention, where the entire complex of this nodal dynamic and the rulers of the nodes can be consciously integrated. And this is the south node. So the teaching, when the south node is the resolution node, it means we need to go back into that south node area and do it, but in a new way, right? Not get stuck in that Scorpio dynamic. What's that Scorpio dynamic? I was killed, I was rejected, I was betrayed, I was abandoned, or I've decided to act in ways that are genuinely hurtful and manipulative and painful according to my own entitlement to do so, right? My own desires got the best of me, and I was consumed by that in a state of distrust or paranoia or greed. Coming back to that south node means facing all of those dynamics. Or I was so depressed, Scorpio, I decided to check out and kill myself. And we should not hide from speaking of these things, because this kind of transit can really bring up those feelings, can really bring up in the collective that sense of, I don't want to be here. I just feel so, I'm different. I don't belong. There's no place for me. I'm not happy. I can't, Scorpio, my deeper distrust and jadedness. Forget it. I don't even want to go because of so much hurt. So there's a lot to face here. So what does it mean to look at that South node in Scorpio as a resolution node? Do that, but integrating that Taurus polarity, right? When we do that Scorpio work, it's going to be messy. And as that caterpillar goes through its process, it actually can't, there's a level to which we can't hold on to the known, because the evolutionary process is itself all-encompassing, and it's not easy, and it's often scary. And it actually calls for a lot of support. Saturn can actually say, get support. Containers, structures, community spaces, therapists, to hold space, constructs that can help us work through this greater evolutionary journey. And that's where we embrace that Taurus polarity. Find a ground of stability. You're here, you're in the body, you need to eat food, maybe, probably. There are certain things you need to attend to. You have a garden. To stay present with the simpleness, the contentment, even of our practice, our spiritual practice, our self-care, our cultivation, to not forego that as we're by necessity dealing with the deeper evolutionary content. The results of all of this can be profound. A maturation to a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of self-responsibility, self-trust, a greater capacity to live here as a human being in systems that are more healthy, more holistic, more supportive, because we're clearing away all of the shame, all the conditionings, all the judgments, and something new can emerge. So that's my little bit on this, and let's chat.
Patricia had to bow out. She had planned to not be here for the whole time, and as she said, the natives were restless. Her dog needed to go now. So you guys are doing an awesome job, and I think you can take it from here.
Thanks, Sue. And thanks, Ari. That was brilliant. I think you said a lot that I was definitely feeling. I think that a lot of us are feeling, and you put it together so eloquently. Thank you. Something that came up for me around things that people have reported to me, especially discussing like the new technologies and even in the financial system, like cryptocurrencies and things like that. I think you touched on this perfectly, like the potential for the elitism and the separation, the exclusion, because some people already feel so separate from that. Like some people are barely getting iPhones, you know, some people are barely getting to use, you know, different messenger apps. Like there's a discomfort, I think, for a certain section of the population with technology in general, to then say, okay, but now in order to make a new financial system that's equitable for everybody, we must all use cryptocurrency. And it's like, oh, that there's dissonance there, because that's, I think if we're looking at how that whole structure, how the foundation has been built there, it's been very like the elect few. And I even feel like people have been almost forcefully taught to be afraid of that. And I don't think I speak for all women in that regard, but I know certainly my experience as a woman. I even remember growing up in my family, and my male cousins were like, supported to talk about stocks and investment and things like that. And then they're like, okay, go bake a pie, you know, like even we're still living in that part of the story too, like where I think a lot of people just feel very excluded from the conversation of how we create a new economy. And I think we can't take that out of this, you know, with the Taurus and Scorpio, the axis of resources. So how do we create a new system that is more equitable without excluding people, without almost, and then at the same time, how can we, I really felt called forward with those South Node and Scorpio reflections. It's like, oh, okay, in what ways, for like in a personal example with the money situation, it's like, in what ways would I make my exclusion of the conversation in the past a barrier for me being part of this conversation in the future? And I think that there is this quantum opportunity to just say, okay, like it doesn't really matter if you didn't know it before. Like there's always an opportunity to learn and be a part of things now. But I just think that it's like a both and, like, how can we hold space for the people that are like, this is really not my thing. And then, but it's not, it doesn't have to be like, oh, if you don't jump on this bandwagon, you're screwed kind of thing. So there's, I know a lot of people are feeling that. I think that's part of this general shift where we're coming into greater understanding of like, if it's not working for everybody, it's not working. Even I thought it was really interesting, all of the, the Mars as the ancient planetary ruler of Scorpio, and then all of the attempts for us to go to Mars. How interesting that is, and how it's like, oh, okay, we want to like put all of this money into leaving the Earth. Right?
Elon
Versus
Musk
like
has Mars on the North Node in Aquarius.
right? Exactly. So there's this,
Wow.
again, we're talking about the like leaving the Earth, and the elite only get to do that. And then the opposite side of that spectrum of the Venusian Gaia energy of like, okay, but let's also take care of these very real needs that are happening here right in front of us, and alleviating poverty and these things that are very on the ground. So I feel like there is this, to just almost reiterate what you were saying, there is this need to go back and look at, well, what is it in us that Mars connected with the South Node, and then these squares with Saturn, what is it in us that makes us feel like we need to leave this place? Why are we in the energy of needing to abandon? What happened? So I do feel like that is the work. And if we get really clear on that work and why, then we can make a new choice. So thank you for all of that. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, go ahead, Ari. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, it reminds me to announce I'm now accepting cryptocurrency for my course enrollment. All you, Jason.
Are you also accepting silver?
No, I haven't thought about that, but
Wow.
yeah.
Interesting. No, I was thinking whenever I see Saturn square the nodes, or coming to square the nodes, or coming really to do anything, but particularly just square the nodes, I always think about reckoning. Like there's a reckoning to be had, and something has to be faced, and that's something I was hearing in the images that you were offering to us, because there is this, and I was also thinking about, I mean, when I saw that we were going to discuss this, where it put me in mind of was like, 1947, when the Saturn was squared these same nodes, but from the other side, right? So it was squared them from Leo, and of course 47 is a big moment of creating lots of enduring problems, good, bad, whatever you want to call it. But India and Pakistan, Israel and Palestine, these are like, this is a major situation, and it's interesting because it's on the other side. So maybe it might be interesting to think of that in terms of the resolution nodes piece as well, right? Because it's the other direction, and so. Anyway, it's just the first thing that comes into my head, and partly because I seem to always read for a lot of people who are born in that time too. Pluto, Saturn, Mars, all hunkered there together in Leo. And it's interesting. I mean, I feel like a lot of people into astrology have this thing. So I have no idea what that is. But what I would say, looking at this and thinking about what you were offering too, is like there is this. To me, Saturn and Aquarius faces us with something like you can't not look at. It just doesn't allow it, and kind of faces it with this overview, with this big picture. Like here's what's really going on. It's very in your face kind of truth is a lot of times what I feel, and and that need to, as you said, really sort of begin our resolution journey with the Scorpio, right? Which is also about facing and confronting in many ways, and going, but particularly with the emotional body, really going into the water element, right? I mean, air. The situation will be that from air to water in that situation, right? So it's like we have to get from the mental, what we can see, what we're faced with that way, into something really emotionally alive, at which point then we can feel that embodiment piece of the Taurus. But it's like there is some deep facing that's in it. That's kind of what I keep feeling. It's like something that you cannot avoid. One of the things about squares to the nodes and the skip step is it's like there's some sort of announcement from the soul, like I'm done avoiding this, like I'm not skipping this part, I'm not like going to jump out of this, I'm not going to hide this one more time, like with your astrologer example, right? It's like this is the time that it's going to be different, and I feel like that is a really transformational opportunity that is in the year ahead with Saturn square the nodes, like to face things and go through them emotionally that are kind of like, again, I think they come in a bigger way. They look like, again, it's that Aquarian thing can be so dissociated, but it's a lot of information. When you bring it into the emotional body, there's there's transformation that's possible. And that's kind of what I feel when I see the Saturn squaring the nodes this way. It's like, no escape, but thank goodness.
Something that arises is how the more removed something appears to be, the more interesting it is. Like for me, it's almost like there's some level of curiosity and interest and some level of detachment when it comes to looking at some of the greater political developments. And of course, there's some level of privilege that allows me to hold that stand, I acknowledge. And on some level, there are certain things that I'm just like, I'm not following the news, I'm not watching, and I'm like, oh, that's happening right now. And without judging that, it just is for me. And so the more it hits home, the more awake it is, right? The more I'm like, oh, actually, well, this impacts my family, or this impacts me, or this impacts my choices, or these people that I care about are actually going to really be affected by this legislation, or okay, there's a new government overthrow happening right now, and oh no, it doesn't affect anything oh, actually that means I'm going to have to pay more taxes. Like there's a certain place where the further we see ourselves from something, the more we can sort of exist and be in the world, but be in that observer place. I'm like, oh, look at the drama that's happening with those human beings. And the moment it starts to touch where we feel our own power, our own control, our own sovereign agency is being threatened, is when we start getting really politicized, or it's when we start to get really radicalized, or things become important when it begins to touch the part of ourself that feels threatened or perceives some level of threat. And I just hold curiosity around that. I mean, it's what I'm speaking to is a very natural thing for all human beings. We tend to become more radicalized when we actually have an experience or a feeling of how it's impacting us or the humans that we care about or the earth that we care about. When we're holding that stance in meditation and witnessing, we're able to access the higher mind, and we can see it's just all coming and going. So my curiosity within all of this is working with that anchor of objective consciousness, simultaneous to being in the process, being in this transformative journey, but also seeing that everything's sort of metaphorical. Like if we can also practice and access, easier said than done, I know, but there's something meaningful. Like a tarot card is an impersonal symbol. It can have all these scary things going on it, but it's a card. And it's just speaking to archetypal dynamics, and actually everything that's unfolding is archetypal elements within our own psyche coming into unity. We're working out our own self-dissonance. So there's something about the ways in which, so take an astrology course, right? Train in astrology, develop a greater objective consciousness, be a part of communities or practices or modalities or healing techniques that also supports the capacity to objectify and see things as an observer, just so that we don't get too sucked in to the personalness and thus the drama and the trauma of trying to resolve our security through all that's unfolding. So we can, unless anyone has anything else to say, we can move on to the next topic.
So that's what we have for today, actually. And the one thing I notice in this chart of the Saturn square the nodes is that Jupiter is very close to conjoining Neptune, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. But if you guys want to give a little, lead into that, how that can mitigate perhaps or add to the story, we can do that, or we can wrap it up.
Honestly, 2.5 hours is quite a long time.
It is. It is. That's why I'm offering.
Yes. Well, nothing arises for me personally to share.
Yeah, I feel okay stopping here. That feels good to me. If anybody's wanting to say something in the chat or questions or that kind of thing, it might be
That's a
interesting.
great idea.
For dialogue that way.
Well,
yeah.
one comment, this has been delightful. What's the rest of it? 2.5 hours of astrology, pinch me. See you tomorrow. Thanks, Kat.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good with leaving it there as well, and also just feeling very inspired for all of these conversations. And I'm just in such a place of gratitude that we can have these conversations and have this openness. So thank you. Thank you to everybody watching. Thank you for everybody tuning in live and watching the recording. It's such an honor to get to talk about these things. And I'm sure so many people are, preparing to relive some past life things where it wasn't okay to talk about these things. So what a beautiful time it is to be radically you, radically authentic, radically responsible for your own evolutionary journey.
Just a thought that arose, and this is riffing on what you were sharing earlier, Jason, with just how there's a lack of connection, physical human connection. With this Saturn in Aquarius in the 11th, I would actually see the danger of that, right? Increasing and the effects, the ramifications of that being really like, this is what's happening in our state of disconnect, in our state of dissociation. So I just hold a curiosity for what's going to emerge. Like Zoom was the whole thing for the past couple years, is like the next level meeting in person. Like what's the healing that we're screaming for, what we're calling for right now? I'm very curious about what our ingenuity, crisis and stress really does produce profound creativity. So we're going to see a lot of that, and I'm kind of interested.
I appreciate you naming that. Yeah, that's been on my mind.
Maybe an app that actually helps us be in person with each other by stimulating sensual experience. I'm just joking.
No, actually, you know what? A friend of mine had something on her iPhone that would chime every, so many minutes to tell her to get back into her body. So it already exists.
Kind of.
Gotta have your iPhone with. It's funny how that works.
I know. I love it.
What were you gonna share, Jason?
Well, just that I that's on my mind, that very thing, in terms of curiosity about how we do come along. It's not as if it seems like, there's going to be a widespread unadoption of technology, but what is the way that will be, I mean, the big thing is, right, it's like the technology advances much faster than we do. So our capacity to keep up with it and have it still meet our human needs and our bodily needs and our connectional needs and all that, it's like this, one could say we're a bit ahead of ourselves, and most of the wisdom that I hear from, particularly when I think of indigenous people who've lived on the planet in sustainable ways for long periods of time, they have all these cautionary tales about technology, right? Technology in a different way. It's, they're not talking about the internet, but they're, even the fact that they could catch all the salmon at the same time, but there's stories about the boy who tried to take too many salmon, right? And the boy who didn't give there are all these cautionary things about slowing down. So when I look at that south node in Taurus, or sorry, north node in Taurus, you know, I think about slowing down, like what does it really feel like to be looking at a computer screen, right? Like, what does it really feel like? And there's something about, if we're slower, it's not that the technology doesn't have a valence of positive or negative, right? But it's a question of slowing our engagement with this situation. It's very hard to do when you are pushed into it by economic necessity, social necessity. You know, but I think that I get kind of curious about that as well, and how will we bridge that, you know, as someone who at the same time very much benefits from the technology and the fact that I can be in different places and not have to be, you know, there's a lot of different helps from it. I don't know. Curious is the word, isn't it?
It's a
But I
good
appreciate,
looking
well,
glass.
but what I wanted to say is I appreciated your optimism about it. That's, or not optimism, but your active reminder that there is innovation, and you know, this kind of situation does sometimes draw out the best of us and what we can do, and it evolves us. I mean, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over whoever was speaking.
Oh, I was saying it's a bit of a looking glass into the coming age of Aquarius and the things we'll be facing.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to thank the panelists. You guys have done such an awesome job. I am beyond pleased at how this turned out. Patricia did just a fantastic job of moderating, and we were lucky to have her stay a little bit longer than she had allotted. And, you know, I'm just so pleased. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kitty says, yeah.